Hey everyone, so excited for quite a few of you to make it back to our workshop series. And for several of you, it may be your first time joining us for this workshop series. So I'll start with a brief introduction. My name is Nikin, originally from Bangalore, India. Came to the US for my undergrad close to a decade ago, and then went into the world of startups. And it was through that path, being part of a founding team of startup and being a founder myself, that I transitioned from an F1 visa to an O-1 visa and ultimately to an EB-1A green card. My EB-1A journey in particular, it took me 3 attempts. I had 4 RFEs during that journey and had to do a lot of work on improving my profile to meet the education standard. So, a lot of what I'll be sharing today comes from my own personal experience. And what happened as a result of that journey is I got the EB1 green card in my hand in November of 22 and was so frustrated with the experience that I realized there has to be a better way. So that's how we started Open Atlas and Open Ventures. So Open Atlas, it's a 501c3 nonprofit. A lot of the work that we do is related to education awareness on talent visas, but other parts of the immigration journey as well. So we have resources on admissions, on jobs, on life in the US, housing, other aspects as well. So it's completely free to join. We have a Slack group. Our community manager here will be sharing a link to the Slack group in the chat. And before we get started, would love to know where people are joining from. So we'll use a chat to keep it as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions during my presentation, you can feel free to ask it in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up for general Q&A. And in the general Q&A, you can ask questions related to the presentation topic. Or if you have questions broadly on O1, happy to answer those as well. Oh, wonderful. I mean, I'm actually in New Jersey. We have Alaska. This is the first time I'm speaking to someone from Alaska. Welcome. Hopefully, you don't have your own time zone. You're in Pacific time. So, okay. We have East Coast, West Coast, the Midwest too. And appreciate all of you for taking time off your busy schedules and making it here. Today, we poll our community in order to find topics for these workshops. And the topic that was most requested was actually on letters of recommendation. So that'll be the focus of our workshop. We'll talk about how to identify recommenders, how to reach out to them, how to get a strong letter of recommendation. That being said, if you have questions on other aspects of O1, feel free to ask them at the end of the presentation. Also, the first session of every month, we'll be doing a general session. So we'll be comparing O1, H1B, and other visa pathways as well. And in case you'd like us to cover other topics, please reply to the polls that we do in the Talent Visa channel in our Slack community. So that way we can queue up the most in-demand topic for next week's workshop. So without further ado, let me share my screen and go into the LOR process for O1s. Hope everyone can see my screen. Okay. I mean, first things first, none of what I share today is legal advice. That is the domain of attorneys. So, in case any of you ask any questions which go into the realm of legal advice, I'll be referring you to the attorneys. However, what I can share is just my own personal experience and also the experience of helping dozens and dozens of people through the O1 EB1 process. So the strategies from this workshop are guided by that experience. Now, what's important to understand is what the letters of recommendations help you do. I mean, for most people, they think of the letter of recommendation similar to what they applied for graduate school. So those letters of recommendations from professors, your colleagues, managers, they are very different from what USCIS wants to see for an O1. Because with O1, what we are fundamentally trying to show is how you're in the top 5% of your field. So it's very important for the recommender to bring that out in the LOR. We want to talk about their background, their credibility, why they are a good recommender. We want to talk about your impact to the field, and we want to connect that to the different O1 criteria. There's about 10 criteria for O1, 8 that apply to people from STEM, and ideally, we're looking to accomplish at least 5 of those 8 criteria for a strong O1 profile. So we can actually cover multiple criteria in the same LOR. So that's a big benefit. And the attorney will bring that out in their petition. So they'll be including the LOR as evidence under different exhibits. They'll be drawing different paragraphs from the LORs in order to make a legal argument. Also, what the LOR is very helpful for is to explain to a USCIS adjudicator who you are, what your field is about. Because the average adjudicator, they are a Gulf War veteran and they're given a standard SOP to follow in order to guide their decision making. So they're not knowledgeable about AI, about most fields for that matter. And the LOR is a great way to even help them understand what your field is about. And then it's a stamp of approval as well, especially if you're making claims related to the impact of your field. It carries more weight when it's endorsed by someone with a track record. And it doesn't beat objective evidence. So if you have citations for a paper, for example, you can just take a copy of that from Google Scholar and submit it. So that's objective evidence. However, a professor who cited your work, if they're talking about the significance and impact of your work in an LOR, that helps the officer understand who you are, what your background is, how novel your research is, how the professor has used that research, and the impact of the field. So, hope that explains that difference. And what are the components of a strong LOR? We'll be doing a demo at the end too. So, I'll be sharing my screen, and one of you who's brave to volunteer, we can bring you to the virtual stage, and happy to do a live session. And the key components of a strong LOR is, I mean, you want to be as specific as possible with your accomplishments, whether it's the organizations you worked with, the impact you've had, and even with the impact, you want to get into numbers, percentages. You want to also draw a comparison to what your peers in the field are doing. And this is something a strong LOR has. So they might say that, hey, Nikin is among the top handful of individuals I've encountered in my career. And here are the reasons why. So this is what his peers are generally capable of achieving. And this is what sets Nikin apart. And as I shared earlier, we can cover multiple criteria in the same LOR. So that actually is a great advantage because when you're going to a recommender, you don't have to work with a recommender for each and every criteria, right? So you can ideally go to one, who's very high signal and get a comprehensive LOR, 2, 3 pages that covers your impact and achievements across multiple criteria. And more than anything, it all comes down to storytelling. What we are trying to show here is through the recommender's experience, through, of course, your achievements, how you're risen to be among the top 5% of individuals, among the top people in your field, and thereby you qualify for an O-1. As we look at some examples, this will become more clear to all of you. But in case you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. Now, who are the types of recommenders we should target? So this is a very common question that comes up. Typically for an O-1, I personally use 6 letters of recommendation. Most applicants also get up to 6 letters of recommendation. So that's kind of what I would ballpark it at. Sometimes applicants even give up to 9. Sometimes applicants give only 4. But 6 is a good rule of thumb to have. Now, how should we break those down in terms of different recommenders? The way I would think about it is you want to have as senior a person in the field as possible. So this could be a VP, a director, C-level, and sometimes even people who are retired. Someone has spent 30, 40 years in a field. That's pretty significant, right? And also, these recommenders can either be connected to you, so they could be in your manager and hierarchy at work, or they could be independent. And this is where we have a lot of flexibility, because what USCIS cares about here is professional independence and financial independence, like as long as you haven't done any work-related projects with them. However, this doesn't exclude your other non-professional ties that you have. So in practice, this means your friends, family friends, neighbors, people you may know through your extended network here in the US, back in India, where I'm from, where perhaps a lot of you are from, all of those become fair game, right? So here it's important to think creatively and out of the box as well. So this is where you can even ask friends and family for help. And especially family, right? Is, hey, who in our family is pretty high ranking in the tech industry or whichever industry we're applying in? Or do we have a family friend who's pretty high ranking? And can we get a letter of recommendation from them? So to kind of bring this all together, ideally, we want to target 3 to 4 independent recommenders who are very seasoned in their field. We want 1 letter of recommendation from someone who, let's say, is a director and up in your organization, and then 1 from a colleague, so the same level as you in the organization. And this is where I would focus the attention when it comes to the letters of recommendation. And as a backup, let's say if push comes to shove, you can also have independent recommenders. So friends of friends who are at the same level as you. But I wouldn't consider them as too strong of a recommender. It don't carry much weight in your petition. And we don't have to get letters signed by everyone we put on our list. And that's what the process entails, right? First, we have to create a list of recommenders. And I'll see if I can screen share one of those lists with you. It has 4 columns. name, title, link to their professional profile, their relationship to you, and another column which is what they're willing to sign off on. So you might have a family friend or a family member who, let's say, is the head of Infosys in the US, head of a VP at Google, for example. And you're like, hey, this person is willing to sign off on anything. Well and good. So let's make a note on that sheet. And when the time comes, we can draft the absolute strongest letter of recommendation and get that signed by them. So hopefully this quadrant gives you more clarity on who to prioritize and who to even reach out to when asking for an LOR. And in terms of a framework to follow as well, what I would suggest is it should be very specific to your profile too. So if you're in tech, it's not much help getting an LOR from someone in the business field. So it's very important to map your accomplishments. And what we mean by accomplishments here are like, what are the biggest wins under your belt? So let's say you worked on a project even at AWS, for example, and it was related to something related to cloud storage. And you have a family friend who's pretty high up in Oracle and has a lot of experience with cloud storage. Even if that was a short project, you were there for in the team for 6 months, 8 months. Now you have someone who's able to provide an endorsement, give you, help you tell a compelling story, and give you a strong LOR on how that project has impacted the field. And that would definitely be worth double clicking on and taking the next steps and executing on, as in drafting an LOR, getting it signed. But that's what I mean by mapping out your accomplishments. So you want to have your top accomplishments, some key projects you've been involved with. If you're well along the O-1 journey, you probably have an Excel sheet of evidence in each criteria, so you can even go into more detail on this. Then I would match it to the recommenders. What can they actually speak about and sign off on? The strongest ones happen to be the most senior and the most independent. And the way to approach the LOR process is to get started as early as possible. Again, the difference is if it's an immigrant themselves, they've gone through one version of this journey or the other. So you can be very transparent about it. Is that, hey, I want to count on you as a recommender for my O-1 petition. Would you be able to support that? However, if they're not familiar with visas or O-1s, then I adopted a different approach, which is, hey, can you help me out with my visa petition? Or can I count on your support for my visa petition? And no further explanation is needed. So if they're receptive, they'll get back to you and you can initiate the process from there. And we'll share a copy of this slides too. So I've kind of shared a template to follow when reaching out to recommenders. So what you want to do is keep it as brief as possible. I mean, I've received requests for recommendations that read like an essay. And I'm like, bro, I don't even have time to reply to this email, like read all of this and reply to this email. So you just want to be very to the point, right? So I'm requesting help for a visa petition. I need your help or I'm seeking your support to cover these accomplishments. And it's very important to give a deadline, even if it's not real. I mean, your attorneys could have just started gathering all the evidence and started the petition process, but you want to give them a firm deadline because people, even well meaning people, tend to procrastinate. And I can tell you a lot of stories around how I had to go chasing after recommenders. And just in terms of providing more clarity, it always helps to hop on a call. But what's also very helpful is to end with a question. So if you're ending an email with a question, then people feel obliged to reply. And it's a good way of establishing continuity and taking the next steps. So, what should the letter itself cover? This is a very important aspect. And we'll go over a sample letter as well. So, the letter typically starts with the recommender's credentials. So, why are they an authority in the field? How are they well positioned to endorse you? And then, how do you know each other? Again, independent recommenders are favored, but if there is a work history here, you want to establish that work history. But even from an independent recommender's perspective, so let's say you have a family friend, but there's a conference presentation that they are very impressed by, you can you can mention that as a point of connection. So you can say that, hey, I know of Nikin through this specific conference, or I read about this conference and I was very inspired by his work. And that's why I agreed to provide this letter of recommendation. Then you want to go into as much detail as possible about the work, the impact of the work. Where appropriate, you want to share 2 to 3 very specific examples. And then you want to tie it to the national interest of the US and how granting this visa to the applicant would advance the field, would advance the national interest of the US. So, on a high level, that's the structure of a letter. And in terms of going into more detail as to what do we exactly cover? I mean, the introduction, conclusion, those are pretty straightforward. But when you're talking about impact, how do we exactly cover that impact? There are a set of buzzwords USCIS really likes to see. And we have a sheet of those buzzwords. We'll share that in our community following this workshop. It was put together by a law firm. So we want to include those action words. We want to include those active verbs. And then novelty and scale, which is how is the work you're doing one of a kind, how it's first of its kind, the only system that does something, what have you, right? And we want to get into metrics. So percentages, numbers, reductions, improvements, adoption rates, and to get as specific as possible. And then what problem has it solved? How has it advanced the field? And here's a great example. So Dr. Chen, he created a machine learning algorithm. It reduced fraud detection time by 70%. And now this is what he did. And now this is the impact of his work. So the system is used by many large companies, doing a lot of transaction volume, and it also received industry recognition. And again, this is a perfect industry example. Very few of us would have all these components in place, but you want to get as close to it as possible. Now, what are the common mistakes that we see in these LORs? So it's, to put it succinctly, it's basically exaggeration or generic praise, and that's not backed up with actual data, or it doesn't tie in well with the story. So yes, USCIS is looking for certain buzzwords, but at the same time, if you're sharing a claim that you're outstanding or this is one of a kind, it really has to be backed up immediately below where you're making that claim with actual proof, right? And also, sometimes we see contradictions. So there's a story that a recommender is sharing, and just for the flow or narrative, you might be placing one project after the other. But if it doesn't line up with your resume and work experience, sometimes that causes an issue too. Often this is picked up by the attorney. I mean, this happens when applicants are taking the initiative. It happened in my case. I took the initiative, I drafted all my LORs myself. And the attorney is like, hey, Nikin, hold your horses. Can, and they commented every second line of the LOR, right? Is, do you have proof for this? Can you explain this more? What does this mean? Please give proof. And they went into a lot of detail. I mean, for me, it was like an excruciating experience, but it was helpful because now I can share with you on what the red flags are to avoid. So I'll take a pause here. If you have any questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. If a question has already been asked, please upvote that question so we know how to prioritize it. But I'll share a few sample letters with you. And we'll also be sharing this resource in the community. So I think it's in the LOR guide. Just give me one moment. Yeah, pretty comprehensive guide. It'll be available to all of you. We'll be doing a prompting exercise live as well, but I just wanted to share this sample letter. So as we were just discussing in the introduction, we want to establish the authority of the recommender and also the relationship. The next paragraph after that is the relationship to the applicant. Then it's an analysis of what they are endorsing and what the impact it will have on the field. The other recognition the applicant's work has received. And you see evidence here of this LOR being leveraged for multiple criteria. So here it's original contributions criteria. Here it's scholarly articles or publications criteria, leading and critical role criteria. So each paragraph is covering a different O-1 criteria. And then a very strong conclusion. So it's a great example of a strong LOR. And here's another example, but where the attorney has given some feedback. So it's a CTO giving feedback on a software engineer. I mean, it's a CTO giving a LOR for a software engineer and the attorney giving feedback on the CTO's LOR. So the CTO is starting off in a strong way, establishing their credibility. But now we start to see gaps. And this is a mistake a lot of people make, is they make it vague. I've collaborated with him on a project. So that's simply not enough for our purposes. We have to provide way more details, as you saw in the previous LOR and as we covered as well. It typically has to be one or two, maybe even three paragraphs, right? So that's completely missing on this LOR. And here too, So there's a very general statement being made saying adopted and implemented by multiple companies. So, of course, the attorney is going to double click. They're going to be like, what's the proof of that? Can we see any screenshots? Is it publicly available on the website? Are there any case studies? So, overall, most applicants, when they start drafting the LOR, this is kind of what the LOR looks like. It has those buzzwords, it covers the accomplishments on a high level, but what the attorney comes back to them with are specifics. So they double click on all the key terms. Yeah, I'm sure some of you have read through this, but in the interest of time, just wanted to cover a very well drafted LOR and a typical LOR and the feedback that attorneys give as well. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Once again, we'll be sharing these resources. They are available to you. We're seeing some questions in the chat. If any of you have additional questions, please feel free to share in the chat. And who wants to volunteer? Because what we'll be doing is a live LOR exercise. And again, I'll just be bringing you on to the virtual stage. We'll be doing a screen share. I'll be looking at your LinkedIn and a potential recommender's LinkedIn. We'll be using your LinkedIn as your CV and resume. And we'll be using ChatGPT for prompting so we can get a good first draft of the LOR. So if anyone is brave enough to volunteer, please send me a DM and I'll bring you on to the virtual stage. And before we do that, let me answer the questions that we have. Ranga asks, can the independent recommenders from outside be from outside the country of residence? So if I was residing in India and most of my work was done in Singapore, can a director from the US write an LOR for me? Would this be a concern? It actually depends on your field, right? So if you're in technology, it's a global field. So people are leveraging and implementing your work the world over. So that it's not a concern, right? However, if you are, let's say, doing public policy in India, for example, or Singapore, for example, then most of your recommenders, just given the nature of your work, are going to be concentrated in Singapore. You might have one or two outside, but it just shouldn't be a function of them being all over because it's not tied to the work that you're doing, the career you've had, and the impact you've had. Hope that answers your question. And just to summarize, if you're in tech, the recommenders could be from anywhere in the world, and that's perfectly fine. Saksham asked, is the O-1 criteria same as advanced degree holders if I apply as an undergrad or after graduating from my bachelor's? How many papers am I expected to publish? As also considering doing a startup for a year on OPT, so I can make a hybrid profile of research plus startup. Is that recommended? There are actually three questions here, but I'll get to them one by one. So, a degree is not a requirement for an O1. So, it actually doesn't matter if you have a bachelor's degree, a master's, a PhD, or you're a dropout. I mean, I only have a bachelor's degree, and I was 20 when my O1 was approved. So, years of experience, degree, those don't matter. Those are not part of the criteria. What matters is what have you accomplished so far? And can we present that as someone who's noteworthy and top of their field? Now, the second question you had is how many papers are you expected to publish? Let's say you're in industry and you want to build a profile that's kind of industry specific, but you're taking leverage of academic opportunities as and when they arise. Then for the O-1, we're talking about 4 to 6 publications. And you can look at these holistically, right? So they don't have to be research papers. They can be trade journal articles. They can be case studies as well. So, and by trade journal articles, I'm talking about there are many reputed tech forums and tech blogs. So those can be tapped into too. And your last question is considering doing a startup on OPT, hybrid profile of research per startup. Either or works. So if you're doing a startup, then the best way to ensure visa success is to just have a successful business. If you get accepted into Y Combinator, if you get VC funding, you will have hit all of these milestones and then some. So you'll be able to sail past the O-1 criteria. On the other hand, if you put your efforts to it, if you work in a research lab, or not even work in a research lab, if you work in industry and take time out to pursue academic opportunities, you can have that industry academic hybrid profile and qualify for an O-1. So, hope that answers your question. There are a few more. Saksham asked, appreciate your kind words, Saksham. Can we apply for an O-1 before we graduate and if our company gets good traction? Yes, you can. The earliest applicant or the youngest applicant I know for an O-1 was a 19-year-old Thiel fellow. So she had dropped out of Brown or Penn, and we connected because she was using the same law firm. And the visas that she transitioned to from an F1 because when she was dropping out, she couldn't continue on F1 status was the O-1. And you asked another question is, can we run a company while we are in college by forming a company with a US co-founder? That's a great question. Yes, you can. I mean, the high level answer is yes, you can. There's more details to it. Happy to answer that one on one. And I recommend asking this question in our community so we can give you a longer answer. Aditya asked, what are the odds that a finance major working in a corporate role rather than in research could qualify as an O-1 candidate? That's a great question. I mean, the O-1, the way I would look at it as you're going into 2026, it's a backup plan, right? So ideally, you want to convince your employer for an H1 because now the odds are way better in your favor if you're already in the US. I would say the odds are 50% or more if you're already in the US. That being said, the O-1 is a good backup option to have. You might be coming up on your lottery attempts. You might already be on a day one CPT. There are situations where it makes sense to do an O-1. So even in terms of a visa strategy, I would have this as a backup. So I guess that was part of your question. But to get to the heart of the question, yes, no matter which field you're in, you can qualify for an O-1 because there's no drop down menu for a field that USCIS gives. It's up to us to define it. So we are saying finance, then all of the evidence and the various criteria have to be finance oriented, right? And you might ask the question that, hey, there's way more opportunities available for people in tech than finance. And that's also not true. It's just where to look. So, for example, instead of judging hackathons, people in finance can judge business competitions, right? So, whether it's startup pitches or case competitions. Like Rice has a very famous one, but other universities, any university with a business club, consulting club, PE club has them too. So that's a good alternative to consider. You can be a scout for a VC firm. A large part of that work is financial analysis. So that's a high quality opportunity as well. And in the interest of time, I mean, we're going to cover this in subsequent workshops. So I'd invite you to the next workshop where we can just do finance related opportunities. But there are many equivalent opportunities that we can find. Diego asked, I'm considering applying for an O-1 through an agent for flexibility. I'd like your thoughts on the structural viability of this approach. Okay. The This is a good question, and I'll kind of expand on it for everyone's information. There are two ways you can file an O-1. So one way is through an employer. Another way is through an agent. Now, what does that mean? An agent could be an individual or could be an organization. They are just attesting to your moral character and agreeing to represent you to different organizations in the US. So you just need a signature on a form from someone who's an agent. But we have organizations such as Deal that offer agent as a service. So you can pay like $200 a month and they help run even payroll for you. And what's the difference between doing an employer O1 and an agent O1 is if you do an employer O1, you're tied to that employer. If you do an agent O1, you can still be employed. So you can have a full-time W-2 employment, but you can take on other W-2 employment. You can take on 1099 employment too. Basically, you have freedom from a work perspective. And if you're laid off, you don't have to worry about a 60-day unemployment clock, which you would otherwise do on an H-1B. And what we need to do to show an O-1 agent is basically we need a few offer letters. So one of the offer letters has to be for at least 3 years. So they grant a 3-year visa to you. But the other offer letters can be for 3 months, 6 months, a year, what have you. And you can get those from friends who are startup founders or other organizations in your network. So to answer your question, Thiago, yes, you can continue your current W-2 employment as an agent and you can continue working on your startup as well as an agent. Awesome. In the interest of time, I'll actually bring up a volunteer for doing the live LOR demo. I think I'm just looking through my DMs to see who messaged first. Yes. Rutuja messaged me first. So, hey Rutuja, can you hear me, Rutuja? Because if you're saying something, we can't hear you. You're unmuted right now. Sorry about that. I think we are having a technical difficulty, but we'll definitely bring you up in our next workshop, Rutuja. Awesome. Shreya volunteered next. Hey, Shreya, I just requested you to unmute.
Hey, yes. Am
Can
I
you hear me
audible?
okay?
I can. Am I audible? Well,
Yes.
should
Perfect.
I share my screen?
I'll actually kind of lead that LOR journey so that way it
Okay,
helps
okay,
everyone here.
sure.
What would be helpful is if you can share your LinkedIn profile in the chat.
Yeah, I can do that.
Oh, that's not the link to your profile. It's just
Oh,
going directly to LinkedIn.
I'm sorry. Um, just a second.
In the meantime, Saksham asked a good question in the chat. How do I get better at reaching out to people? Honestly, Saksham, it's like a numbers game. So I just recommend reaching out, overcoming that initial hesitation, fear of talking to people. All of us started somewhere and then going from there, right? So happy to share tip strategies, what was initially helpful. And I'd recommend asking this question in our community as well. So I have your profile pulled up, Shreya. Let me just share my screen. So it's visible for all of us. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay. There's not much information to go off on your LinkedIn profile. So I'll make some assumptions for the sake of our demo. But in general, when we're doing the LOR process, and if LinkedIn is the primary source of someone's profile, the way we want to take a copy of their profile is by clicking the more option here and downloading their profile as a CV resume. So this is something even the attorneys would do. They'll ask you for a recommender's CV or even your own CV. And if you don't have a version available, they'll just go and download your LinkedIn profile, the recommender's profile, and use that in the petition. So it's going to be helpful for exercise, which is why I'm doing it now. And Shreya, is there a potential recommender of yours whose LinkedIn profile we could look up?
Um, Maybe my principal architect.
Okay. Can you share their profile?
Yeah, I can.
Or it could even be a professor from your university. I mean, their profiles are pretty much public already.
Yeah, sure. I can share that as well.
Is that the correct person I'm looking at?
Yeah, that's one of my professors. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So we're going to follow the same step, which is we're going to save a copy of the profile. And now let's go to our favorite prompting tool and let's upload both the files. And here we want to, I mean, you can even start at a high level, which is, I mean, I have to switch to third person here, but Shrey's an O-1 applicant. Jeanette is the recommender. Now it's going to give us a good enough letter of recommendation. Yeah. Shrey, I know we are quickly going through this and you're seeing this for the first time, but even from what you have shared earlier in today's workshop, what would you say are the gaps here? Like, why is this just a good or good enough LOR and not a great LOR?
I'm guessing one of the gaps would be that my profile that was downloaded, it's not up to date. So that could be one of the reasons.
Yeah, that's one, which is the input profile
Yeah,
that we are
yeah.
giving. But the
Um,
other is also how specific it is, right? So, in terms of what
this is.
we want to expand on,
Mhm.
so you see how Janet, hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly, she's making a claim here that you have a rare ability to translate complex research questions into something strong and very practically grounded. But there is no further information on it, right? So she's not sharing an example and going into specifics, metrics on why that is the case. And for the sake of the demo, I'm going to give ChatGPT some permissions to make stuff up.
Okay. You mean like a proof to what she's recommending?
Exactly. So ideally, this information is already in your resume, CV, or even your LinkedIn profile. So chat will just take that out and then draft it in the right format. Okay. Here too, it's not, I guess it's improved. Before it used to be much better at making things up. But I hope I'm able to share the thought process, which is we want to have the LOR share as much specific details as possible, right? So even the second draft, it's better than the first draft, but
Mm.
there's still a lot more details that can be added in order to improve it. So this is where, if I were you, I would start prompting it more. As here is project one I did, project two I did under Janet's supervision. This is the impact it had. I just want to make sure we have a stronger example. Now we are getting closer. So anything that's bolded,
Hmm.
we are starting to see numbers, right? So, and ideally, this is replaced with your real work and with other metrics as well. And what the attorney would also do is they would take a highlighter and highlight these key points and they would bring it up in their attorney support letter as well.
Okay.
And the reason that's important to understand is none of these petitions are directly submitted to USCIS. So the way the petitions are submitted is everything is physically printed, shipped to a lockbox. They staff at the lockbox facility who take the letters, scan it, and then that scan copy is reviewed by the officer. So it's an inefficient system, which is why the attorneys go through the extra effort of bolding certain paragraphs, highlighting certain paragraphs. And here we see chat itself doing it for us. And finally, I'll close out with one to two things. So this is something we often have to prompt chat to expand on is the impact on the field, because oftentimes it summarizes things in the concluding paragraph. And the concluding paragraph is an opportunity for us to be as strong as we can in terms of an endorsement.
Okay.
Okay. Typically, I would prompt it for the full updated LOR, but hopefully, this gives you a better idea. Any questions, Shreya, on just this workflow and process so far?
Not really.
Okay.
I think
But
I'm still trying to understand the whole process as well as I think in one of the previous sessions I mentioned that I feel like my field is very unknown. There's not much about it, and I don't know many people as well doing the same process. So, still trying to get a better understanding.
can you post it in a talent visas channel saying, hey, anyone else who's architecture here? Because there's 1900 people on the channel. So if there's enough interest, we can even create a subgroup within the community, right? And you folks can take it offline too. You can create like a separate WhatsApp group and continue the conversation. So happy to be helpful there. And did you attend the judging session last week?
No, I missed that one. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
We very similarly brought someone up and walked through live search of judging opportunities. So we'll do a session in a week or two on judging again, and happy to bring
Okay,
you back to the virtual stage and we can do like a search for opportunities relevant in your field.
sure. Thank you.
Awesome. I know we are a few minutes past time, but we started late. Appreciate all of you for staying through the workshop and for being engaging, asking questions. We'll close out in a few minutes, but just wanted to ask if there were any final questions. Happy to take a few more. Can be related to LORs. It can be related to other topics on O-1 too. You don't have to type it out. So just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Awesome. Going once, going twice. Amazing. Thank you all so much for taking the time this evening. I know it's the holidays. Really appreciate making it to our workshop. And please do join our community. Any questions, you might have tomorrow, you're like, hey, Nikin, I remembered, I forgot to ask you this. You can ask it in our community. My only ask is I'm available on DM. My only ask is you ask it in the talent visa channel. So any responses we give, it benefits everyone. So please join our community so we can continue the conversation. And please keep an eye out for the polls we'll do so we can come up with a topic for next week's session. Wishing all of you a very happy Christmas if you celebrate, happy holidays overall, and appreciate you showing up today and for all the engagement.